Welcome to the TOSB Conversations hosted by the Outstanding Speakers Bureau. And I'm your host for today evening, Ajit Sharma. I'm the speaker coach for TED Talks India, Nai Soch, and I'm the current TEDx ambassador for TED, and I'm also a speaker and communication coach. For everyone who has interacted with TOSB earlier and for all those new friends that we're making today, let me share with you what TOSB does. TOSB works very closely with some of the leading minds from across the globe who bring their cutting edge perspectives on the biggest ideas that are shaping the world today. TOSB customizes various kinds of interventions for their clients, from webinars, knowledge series, social media influencer engagements, workshops, leadership coaching and advisory, and a lot of other exciting things. And today we are here for a very exclusive session on how to grow your personal brand in a crisis. A lot of viewers from across the world have been writing to us for quite some time to create a session like this, and there could not be a better time to do this because most of the businesses and organizations faced a very rude shock a few weeks ago, but we are now slowly starting to come out of that shock and begin a journey into recovery. Some of us struggled, some of us were resilient, and some have already started creating new realities and new rules for the game. But there's something that we all often talk about, we value a lot, but we never really get our hands around it because we don't know what's right or what's wrong and where do we start from. And that thing is your very own personal branding. We are joined today by two very wonderful people who have done incredible work across different countries, across different sectors in last so many years. Please join me to welcome our first guest for today, Anamika Sirohi. Now, Anamika is a business leader with over 2 decades of experience in building some of the most loved brands and businesses globally. She's worked alongside some of the brightest minds in marketing and advertising. She's a very sought after speaker, and she's done phenomenal work on leadership, on marketing, and she's especially known for bringing a lot of humor and fun to her work and her talks. And the reason why this session is so special because Anamika was also recognized as the LinkedIn voice, and she's a very, very strong LinkedIn influencer in 2019. And she's agreed to be on this session with us. And I would request all the guests, if you have any interesting questions on personal branding session today, please post your questions here and we will pick the best questions, and the best question gets a personal LinkedIn makeover session with Anamika herself. And Anamika, what do you feel about this session?
Thank you so much for having me, Ajit. Thanks to you, thanks to Delphine, and thanks to the TOSB team. Ever since this LinkedIn voice was announced, one of the most asked questions for me has been this whole thing about personal branding. And it's a great opportunity, and I think the timing is perfect to have a session like this. In fact, just earlier this week, I put a poll on LinkedIn asking people, what they thought of personal branding, and 70% of the people who responded said they actually wanted help. So I think it's just the perfect thing to be doing, and I'm excited, glad to be here.
That's so exciting. Thank you for being here with us, Anamika. My second guest is also a very, very exciting and a very, very multifaceted, multi-talented personality. Please welcome Delphine. Delphine is an experienced marketing, innovation, and business executive professional, and she's worked in the consumer goods and luxury industries. And she spent a decade at some of the world's largest consumer packaged goods companies, where she turned struggling businesses and brands into successful ones with her growth strategies. She's led major innovation initiatives to help brands maintain relevance with consumers in today's very fast-paced and very changing dynamic environments. She supports entrepreneurs, and she's a business leader herself, and she helps leaders develop their growth strategies and get their businesses to the next level. And I again want to thank Delphine because she has also offered that the best question asked today will get 1-hour coaching session with Delphine on how to grow their businesses and companies. So thanks again for that, Delphine. Delphine is a world traveler. She's lived in France, Germany, Switzerland. She's worked with more than 15 countries. And she likes to volunteer, teach kids at a primary school, and she has a very notorious cat also. Is that right, Delphine?
Yes.
So, welcome, Delphine. What do you think about this session?
Well, thank you for the introduction. I do have a very notorious cat. Yes, indeed. Look, I'm super excited to be here. I'm actually very happy because Anamika and myself know each other since now quite a few years. We met back in 2016 at a conference, and we've been in touch since then. And now is actually the first day where the first time where we get together and get to share together and contribute together on a topic, which I'm extremely happy and extremely excited about. So very happy to be here.
Wow, likewise, Delphine. Glad to be here with you.
Thank you, Delphine. I can't wait to get this conversation started. And all of us have been on so many different occasions talking about how the next few months are going to be for us. And we are, like I said, some of us are, rediscovering ourselves, rediscovering our businesses. And in all of that, people do feel the struggle to create their own identities, present themselves to a brave new world. Things are changing. But Anamika, my first question to you is that a pandemic and the economy is going down, right? And these are two very, very difficult ideas to take in. But is it the perfect storm? Is this a storm you want to talk about?
Yeah, Ajit, great question. I think it is the perfect storm, yes, but I think the idea one has to keep in the back of one's mind is that we are not all in the same boat. We do have agency, and not everyone is suffering equally. So if you think about how the world has been, if you look at the visual which was there previously, there's a reason why I had put it, there is so much chaos and so much suffering around. There's almost a sense of the world ending. But that particular slide, what it does is it puts in context the current crisis we have with some of the crises which have happened historically. And then you figure out, okay, this is probably your perspective kind of shifts, that the world has lived through all of that and life does go on. I think what's required is a mindset shift. And once that happens and you're back in the game, you're ready to take on whatever life throws at you.
That's very interesting. Anamika, what do you mean by the mindset shift? Tell us more.
So if I've been observing people around me and how they've behaved during the crisis, and I'm sure you have your same set of experiences. You can almost bucket people into the various stages where they are. There's the first stage where it's almost denial, the comfort zone. You're almost like an ostrich and you just don't want to believe that life is going to change. You hope that things will go back to the old normal at some point in time. And you're basically just, waiting for stuff to get over, just sitting back. Then there's a fear zone where you see people who are very angry. They're the guys who will shop for all the toilet paper in the supermarket. And there's the sense that each person is for himself. And then when you get beyond that, you get to the learning zone and the growth zone. And, actually, if you look around in your organizations, at least in mine, I see colleagues at different levels who've really shown during the crisis. I mean, they've, really stepped out of their comfort zone and displayed exemplary character, resourcefulness. And in fact, I want to give you an example of a neighbor of ours. These guys, they had a travel agency, both husband and wife working in the same agency. And as you can imagine, it's not the best business to be working on right now. And business was slow. So what they did was they turned a passion. They both love to cook and they turned it around. They started a home chef business and they fed the entire condo of ours. So if you actually sit down and look at how much they made, it's an excellent number. So it's a perfect example of turning, a crisis into an opportunity. But there's more to it. The reason why all of us ordered from them and really supported them was at the heart of it, they were very nice, genuine people. We really liked them. So they already had a great personal brand going for them. And that, I think, is the difference. If you have a great personal brand right now, you are going to thrive through the crisis much better than some of the others.
Yeah.
Interesting. I actually quite agree with what you're saying, that this is a time that when we have to look all of this as not just a problem but as an opportunity to spin, do new things. And that takes me to a very interesting thing that I want to ask Delphine about personal branding, right? Even before we get into decoding and trying to understand how does it work and how can I build it, tell us and tell the viewers, why does it even matter? Like, how does it even affect my personal life, my professional life? What's the outcome of thinking about personal branding?
Yes, you mean why are we here, actually?
Yes.
Yes, no, it's a very good question. And let me show you a quick visual about that. So personal branding matters because it can help you on 3 different levels. On the professional level, on the personal level, and on the managing the environment level. So if I start with the first one, with the professional level, personal branding helps you making clear what you have to offer. So whether that's during networking, interviews, job search, or even job creation, if you're an entrepreneur, it is something that is going to help you. I did it myself, for example. When I started as a coach, personal branding helped me clarify what I had to offer and eventually helped me setting up my business. So it will help you be sharp, it will help you get what you are across, it will help carry clear values that others will be able to understand and even sometimes recognize themselves in. So, so really from a professional standpoint, it helps you making clear what you have to offer. The other thing it helps you with, it helps you let you control your narrative, which is extremely powerful, because from the moment you can do that, you are putting words in their perception of you. So you are gaining quite some control of how you're going to come across, which is extremely powerful from professional level. So that's for the first piece. Now there's also a personal level impact. And this is probably one of my favorite aspects of personal branding, is that there's actually a cognitive element to it. We as human beings will live in narratives. So narratives are mental pathways that we have, and they actually guide us through our life. They guide our actions, they guide our decisions. And so narratives are extremely powerful, but also we create our own narratives. The way we talk up to ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves, those are narratives. And so if you think about it, being clear about your personal brand is going to have an impact on your narrative and will have a cognitive element to it, which is extremely powerful. And now for the last piece. So there's also an aspect about helping you manage the environment. And I think right now is probably the best example where clearly we have very little control on what's happening. Maybe we thought by the past we did, probably wrongly, but clearly now we don't have like much control on what's happening. And personal branding is probably the thing we have the most control on. And so if you think about today's context, it's actually a way to find some form of anchor in a world that is completely shifting.
I'm so curious to ask more, but can you give me some examples of
Sure.
Personal brands, how people have done it? I remember you had once shared this very interesting anecdote about Michelle Obama.
Yes.
Before I go, I would love that you could share that incident with our viewers.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, I read recently Becoming, which is her book, her biography. And for me, she's a perfect example of what personal branding can do for you in terms of impact, but also in terms of your contribution to society or your community. So her story is actually pretty interesting because she didn't want to be a public figure initially. Which is interesting if you think where she landed. And even as she entered the White House, her first initiatives were rather small initiatives, like planting a garden, like planting vegetables in the White House garden, until it became a very big food impact initiatives across the US. And so if you think about it, despite not wanting to be a public figure and starting with very small experiments, her impact impact ended up being tremendous, whether that's on women, on communities, or even on society. And what helped her have that impact is precisely personal branding and the personal brand she built over the years. From defining what deeply matters to her to understanding how to bring that to life. And so for me, that's probably one of the core reasons why personal branding matters so much, is that it's a way to make your greatest gift understood and available to most.
Is that then the starting point for us to start decoding what personal branding is? And before I get an answer from you, I want to share with both of you that a lot of our viewers are sharing questions already, and I'm going to keep those very interesting questions towards the end. But to all my viewers, please keep them coming. Like I said in the beginning, you may have a chance to get a very, very exclusive session with both our speakers, a very specialized LinkedIn makeover, which is your first step to become a big personal brand, and also a coaching session from Delphine. But Delphine, just following up to what you said, how do we now decode this personal branding?
Yes. So, and let me show you also a quick visual on this one. So, personal branding, there's two aspects to that. There's the personal side and there's the branding side. And the way I like to think about it is a bit like our brain. There's the creative side of the brain, and then there's a more rational side, the strategic side of the brain. And so starting with the personal, more emotional and creative side, we all, as human beings, we have a purpose and a mission, right? There's a reason why we're on Earth, and we all have a purpose and a mission. And so personal branding for me really starts by identifying what those are. So it's not necessarily a very easy journey to get on, but maybe just a couple of sample questions that can help start that process are things like, what gives you energy? What takes it away from you? How do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be talked about? If you were to strip everything away and let's say only your soul remains, what is he or she here for? What's your contribution? What's your genius? And I love this one because we all have a genius. It's not necessarily uncovered. Sometimes it's buried very deep inside us, but we all have some form of genius in us. And so the personal side of personal branding is really everything that's related to your heart and soul. Now comes the branding side, and the branding is more of the strategy. And this is where sometimes personal branding can feel a little bit schizophrenic, because on one side you have the more emotional and like true purpose side of you, and then there is the other side, which is more the branding, the strategy. And for me, this is what is important about personal branding, is you have to treat it like a brand. So what does that mean? It means that strategically, you need to treat it with a distance. Don't fall in love with your brand, which again, seems completely contradictory because it's me. But still, as me, and as I'm treating myself as a brand, I need to treat it with a distance. Another aspect that I think has been extremely amplified with the COVID situation is the vulnerability. So, and making it relatable. I mean, we've all been sitting in Zoom meetings like across the world and for the last 2, 3, maybe even more months. And so like right now, for example, viewers can see my background. They can see my living room, and I can see in Anamika's living room, and I can see in maybe your office. And so we more than ever have we had a sneak peek into each and other's intimacy. So, which is kind of interesting, right? Because physical distance has actually got us closer and more intimate one with each other. And I think that's very important because that is going to carry on, meaning that as we continue throughout the years, people will expect that intimacy and that reliability and that vulnerability. And so when it comes to personal branding, it's something definitely that we want to include. And then the last piece when it comes to branding is being focused. So being focused on your target. Who is it that you want to be talking to? Be clear about that. Know who you want to talk to. Know what you want to feed them with. Be very clear about that. But also be focused on what you have to offer. And again, that is probably going to be one of the most difficult things to do, because as human beings, we are multifaceted. We are complex. We are nuanced. We are very rich internally. While when it comes to personal branding, you need to capture your essence in one sentence, maybe two, which again is very contradictory and will push you to think really and boil down what is it that you want to come across, even if it's very difficult, because you're much more than that.
And so you're trying to say that for a lot of people, when we see that it's so effortless, some people have the ability to exhibit such strong personal brands. A quick note on, you think it's a science or you think it's an art? How do people do that? And there are a lot of viewers who are also sharing some similar things, and maybe we'll have time to discuss it at length also. But like a quick note, how do people do that? Is it a science or an art?
So I would say it's probably going to be both. It's a science and an art. And also I would love to hear Anamika's thoughts on that. But it's an art because there is this creative side of us that we want to bring forward. So it is an art, but it's also a science because as I said, you want to treat it strategically. You want to treat it with distance. You have to be focused. So I would say it's probably both. It's a science and an art. I don't know, Anamika, what do you think?
Yeah.
No, it's excellent. It's excellent hearing you speak, perfect marketer turned to a coach, because the way you speak about brands is just right, bang on. Yes, Ajit, you want to ask me something? Yes.
You're just following up to what Delphine said, and Anamika, you were recognized last year as a LinkedIn top voice, in 2019, and yes. I'm very sure there's a recipe behind it. I'm very certain there is some step-by-step process, or there is some framework that you follow, some principles, some guidelines and thoughts. How do you do it? How should people do it?
You want me to tell the secret sauce, the secret recipe?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So there is a formula to it, especially if you're starting off. And I call it fulcrum. That's something I just came up with because, it does the heavy lifting. So fulcrum, the first word I would say is first find out what your brand is already. Now, you may say you may not have put any effort into creating a personal brand, but I've got news for you. You have one already. All of us have a personal brand, just as we have our own shadows, and there's not much you can do about it. It's there. So the first job, I think, would be to figure out what your brand is already. And there are two steps you can do if you're just starting off. First, just run a search for yourself online. You will see historic stuff tumbling out, parties you've been to, some holiday pictures you've uploaded somewhere, websites on which you've left comments, all this, the skeletons in the cupboard almost keep tumbling out. And, you can be surprised with how much of what you've done and your personality is already out there. So that'll be one part of it. And it can be good and bad both. It can be a pleasant surprise as well. The point is you need to actively manage your online footprint. The other way to figure out your personal brand is to speak to some people you work with, people you know well, people in your neighborhood. The idea is that people who really interacted with you closely, and ask them to describe you in 1 or 2 words. And these need to be people you trust, obviously, and then figure out whether there's a pattern in what emerges. So I would say these two together will give you a fair idea of your baseline or your starting point. And then once you know what you find, and if it's different from where you want to go, because brands evolve, right? You might have had a personal brand at some point in time, but you want to go somewhere else. It's not serving your needs anymore and you want to evolve. So then comes the next step where you find out, like Delphine very clearly pointed out, and she articulated it so well, what is unique about you? And this is both your skills and what you bring on the table, but also your attitude and personality. And then you write down a single sentence which describes you. And it's the same exercise. Those of us who've been in marketing would know it's very similar to how you describe a brand. What is it that you do? What is it that you bring on the table? And that's a tough part because, it takes a lot of soul searching, and it's not just where you are right now, but also where you want to go at some point in the future. Then comes the next part. Once you have both of these sorted, because we are talking in the professional context, I would say go on LinkedIn and do an audit of your profile there. It's shocking how very senior people somehow treat their profiles so casually. So first off, your photograph itself, please make sure your face is visible. It's professional, just the basics. And I can spend half an hour on this piece alone, but I won't. But just be aware, whatever it is that you want to project, is your LinkedIn profile actually in sync with what you should be doing? Is it going to serve you well, or is it completely dissonant? Now, once you have the basics in place, and these are increasing order of complexity, these are, I think, the hygiene. Then you start off, and you don't have to just jump into it. You can dip your toe into the swimming pool, so to say. Start commenting on, updates of people who you really think are in line with what you're interested in. Leave little notes or link up with people. Connect with people who are going to be in sync with your personal brand and the direction you want to go to. And only once you have a comfort level, that's when you start creating and connecting big time. Which means you go do posts, you have interesting thoughts to share. You can write blogs. There are n number of ways of creating content. Shoot videos of yourself if you're a confident speaker. Put them out there. Just really start putting yourself out there. And then once you're comfortable here is the part which I talk about, which is mentoring and reaching out. And that's what Delphine spoke about, the whole Michelle Obama example that she started very small with a little vegetable patch. I think that's bang on. And it's such a great example because you don't need to jump into it big time. Just know that a little bit of it every day is what you need. You need to commit to it. It's like any other skill or any other big thing worth achieving.
Yeah.
So I think the Holy Grail, and I'll just end, the Holy Grail is that whenever people think of a topic, let's say you've identified yourself as a speaker, right? And a coach, speaking coach. So whenever it is that somebody sits down and says that, look, I need a speaking coach, your name should pop up first. And if you've done that, you're home with your personal brand. That's the Holy Grail.
But there's another follow-up question to that you said that when we build our presence and when we start building a brand, there's some soul searching. We do an audit of our work. We do an audit of how do we even put out this work to the world. What if you don't like what you see? You don't like the outcome of this audit that you've done, this soul searching. What if you don't like it?
Yeah, that's often the case, or you don't like it, or it no longer serves your purpose. Maybe you were a certain person and you evolve. For me, for example, when I was younger, starting off as a brand manager, the biggest thing was to talk about the campaigns I was doing. We did this is an ad that came out, and at that point that was completely appropriate. But as you move on, you have to kind of start talking about other stuff. You're talking about leadership and you're talking about business and results and delivering stuff. So I think it has to be completely in sync with where you are at that point in time. Know that like any brand, a personal brand is a living, breathing thing. And you need to continuously kind of tweak it and feed it and nurture it.
Delphine, any quick comment before we would like to spend more time taking questions from the viewers also. Any quick remarks on that, what Anamika just shared?
Yes, no, I really love what you said, and we completely copy what you really shared. I loved you sharing your experience. It really resonated a lot with me, and I think definitely this point of personal brand is a living object, if I may say, is really something very powerful, and I think really something to keep in mind. Yes, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. So allow me to take the first question, and we've got a lot of questions actually, and we have a big competition as to who gets the best question award and gets time with you. I wish I could post my own question and get more time with both of you, but I think I still can. But we have Ravi Kant who's asking that today everyone wants to create their personal brand, and as everyone has some past, right? Anamika, like you rightly mentioned, but there are some positives and negative notes also. Some So what are the few questions that need to be answered before creating this personal brand? What should people ask themselves if they've had some positive or negative in the past? Anamika?
Delphine, you want? Okay, me? All right. Sure. Look, your past is something which is a part of you, right? It's part of how you've grown and how you've come this far. And part of being an authentic brand is owning up to it. You can't, it's something which was part of your growing up, mistakes happen, and you're human. And that makes you more endearing and authentic, like Delphine was saying, this whole point of being vulnerable. I think that's important. But having said that, once you know that there is something that's not serving you anywhere or doesn't sync with where you want to go anymore, I think then the conscious point is to start doing a lot more of where you want to go. So that kind of drowns out the other stuff. People see the new you. When they hear you, they hear the right stuff which you want to say. And also, just run an audit. It's easy to see old photographs. Maybe you don't want them, just remove them. Edit out stuff which you don't think works for you anymore. So I think it's a bit of balancing of both, doing much more of what you love and stopping what's no longer serving you anymore.
Awesome. We have a next question from Dinesh, and he's asking that, is being talkative or stereotype thinking one of the things in personal branding? I think if I may reinterpret this, I think the question is, when you're trying to build your personal brand, do you really need to be very, very vocal, outspoken, and keep sharing and talking too much? Delphine?
So that's actually a very, very good question. I would say yes and no, which is a tricky answer, but let me explain. So yes, because if you have a personal brand and once you have identified and designed it in a way, you want to put it out there, okay? People's perception of you will be based off of what you feed them. So if you don't tell them about your brand, they cannot guess. They can't. So that's the yes part to your question, which is yes, you need to put yourself out there. Now, does that mean that you need to be like talking all the time? Does that mean that personal branding is only for extroverted? No, of course not. In fact, it's also going to be linked to what your personal brand is about. If it's about, I don't know, a coach who has to be showcasing very strong listening skills, then you have to be very clear and precise about when you put yourself out there and when you actually give space to others. So, and that's just one example. But I would say that's really going to be more of the no answer to the question, which is it all depends on your personality and it all depends on how you want to put yourself out there. But if you're introverted or if you're shy, you don't have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone to carry your personal brand, definitely.
Agree.
Keep it as meaningful and be very mindful of what you're doing, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. I have another question from Anshu, and I'm going to club it with another question that's been asked by Yusuf. And putting them both together, the question is that it's a very, very competitive space right now, and all the more because we no longer have so many avenues and opportunities to present ourselves, but we are constrained by everything being so digital. So how do you build differentiators in your own personal brand when the space is so competitive? And especially in these times, in this, in this pandemic, when businesses are going down, economies are shrinking, there are fears and concerns. How do we build differentiators in our personal brand?
Yeah, I can go. So I would say, I think what will differentiate you from the majority is your authenticity. Your authenticity and how much you've been able to articulate and to show who you are deeply to the world. Why I'm saying that is because, at least my view on the current landscape is, when you talk about a crowded landscape, we talk about a crowded sameness. So people see what other people are doing and they copy what they see. So yes, that space is crowded and you don't want to enter that space. But if you're able to carve out your own space, And I would say, again, through authenticity, you can do that. This is where you're going to differentiate yourself and carry your own voice. And again, remember, people don't want to connect with stereotypes. People want to connect with people. So if you're able to put your realness out there, this is what is going to help you differentiate.
Yep. Agree.
Yeah. We have so many questions coming in, and all of these are wonderful questions, all very relatable. But I'm going to request that let's go over them like very quickly between Anamika and Delphine. And we have Kriti, who's asking that for me, personal branding is nothing but an advanced awareness of ourselves and being authentic and relatable. Like Delphine, you rightly said, staying authentic. Is this correct? And also, what role does PR play in it? It's a very important question because, as you move beyond a point, PR does kick in, and the role becomes very evident. So, Anamika, what do you think what do you think on this?
So again, I will say yes and no, because what she mentions, this whole fact about knowing yourself and being authentic is the first step. But you can be the most authentic person and the most skilled person, but unless other people out there know what you're bringing to the table, unless you're able to communicate the value which you're adding, I think it's an incomplete equation. So the mathematical equation needs to balance. You need to have substance, but people need to know what you're bringing to the table. So I think both are part of it. Now, PR, I don't know what she means necessarily by it. Is she talking about PR as in, having PR around stuff that you do? I think PR makes sense if you are doing initiatives which really, deserve a lot of recognition or need to go out to a lot of different people. You want more than a few people in your close circle to know about it. And yes, if it's not a taboo word, why not? If you're doing something which is fantastic, which can add value to the lives of people around you, I think PR is completely on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
We have another question from Tina, and her question is, Tina Thakur, her question is that we tend to get caught up in thinking of our brand as something that people perceive us to be. How do we keep that bias away while we are articulating our brand? It's a very good question. How do we keep that bias away? That we tend to get caught up in thinking that our brand is something that people perceive us to be. How do we keep that bias away while articulating our brand?
Yes. So I would say that's a brilliant question, by the way, and it's really hitting at the core of the challenge around personal branding. The answer to that for me is it all comes down to the personal side of personal branding, and the fact that you want to anchor yourself in what your purpose and what your mission is, what your true purpose and your true mission is. As long as you're not fundamentally clear on that, yes, you will be influenced, or you might be influenced by what people think of you. But the moment that you have really identified what that is, this is where you start to be able to take a step back about what people think of you and accept that through your personal brand, there are some people who are going to be able to relate to and some people who won't, and that's fine. But again, you want to start with what your true purpose and your true mission is, so you can feel deeply anchored in that and be able down the road to make those hard decisions.
I think that's a great answer, and I just want to add one line to it, Delphine. It's true of any good brand. If everyone wants you, you're a commodity, right? At the end of the day, you have to have a personality which reaches a certain number of people who resonate with what you bring to the table, and not everyone will connect with you, and that's okay.
So
all
true.
Right.
So true.
Right. That brings me to the last question, and I so wish we had more time for it. But quickly on the last question, I would love to get both your thoughts on this. Our last question is by Suhani, and her question is: one might want to build a personal brand while being employed and working with an existing brand that they are with, right? it's often that we find ourselves in these difficult situations. So her question is, how does one balance between the two and build on it? What should be the focus? And I would love to get an answer from both of you, because this was the last question.
Sure. So is the question linked to the fact that it's when times are challenging that we are pushed to build our personal brand? Is that the question?
No, so the question is that, you might be wanting to build your own personal brand while you're still employed at another company or organization. So how do you balance out both, and how do you focus, and what should you focus on?
I'll go for this first, because I do have a point of view. When we use the word personal brand, most people think of building a brand outside of their workplace. But the truth is that you spend most of your time adding value to your current employer. And the first thing you should be doing is building your personal brand within the organization where you're working, because if you're unable to articulate what you bring to the table there, then it's very hard to be doing it outside. So I think this whole thing of bringing value to your employer or wherever you are is very important for me, at least. So, if there are 20 brand managers in an organization, what is it that you do differently? And is everyone around you clear about it? Are you great at media? Are you great at communication? Are you fantastic at, consumer insights? What is your superpower at the workplace where you work? That's the first step, I would say. And no, I don't think they're contradictory at all. In fact, most of the organizations now quite value people who can act as their spokesperson or are seen in a great light outside. So I would say be honest to both, deliver value to wherever you're employed, and make it part of your journey. I would say I don't see a contradiction there at all.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with that. And I would say I would even push it further and say be proactive. If I think about myself, when I started in my professional journey, I was not proactive at all about my personal brand. I would let really people decide what they thought of me until I discovered the power of personal brand in any kind of situation, professional, personal situation. And so, building on what Anamika said, be proactive about that. And if you are not asking yourself all those questions that we mentioned around personal branding, then maybe that's a cue that maybe you should, and be very proactive about this journey, because once again, it's a narrative you want to have a good grasp on.
Yep, agree 100%.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's so insightful. And like I said, I wish we had more time, but this brings us to the end of this very, very packed, very insightful session, full of wisdom, these nuggets of knowledge that both of you have shared from your experience. And I would once again like to thank the Outstanding Speakers Bureau for facilitating this conversation, getting all three of us.
Yes.
And I've absolutely loved and enjoyed every bit of this session. Before we sign off, I would also like to announce, and it's a very tough spot. I've been in a very tough spot to decide the winner. All the questions are so meaningful. Each of those questions, that in themselves are like a half an hour session, maybe more. Yeah. But for the sake of choosing the best question, allow me to announce the two winners. The question that was asked by Suhani and the question that was asked by Tina, both have been chosen as the best questions. We received a lot of them, and I want to congratulate both Tina and Suhani for bringing more insights and more value with your questions and making this conversation even more interesting and exciting for all of us. The Outstanding Speakers Bureau team will reach out to you and will connect you to Anamika and Delphine both. Yeah. I
look forward to it.
Thank both of you, because what you have done today is not just shared how personal branding works, why does it affect, but for a lot of people who sit on the fence and people who are at a certain stage in their careers deciding whether they should take the jump and start building the personal brands or not, I think they'll have a sleepless night tonight, because they're going to be thinking and contemplating that time has come. We live in a world where building a personal brand is no longer a choice, but a very meaningful necessity, I would say. And for both of you to have pushed us to start doing that more meaningfully, in such a cluttered world, for us to be able to do that meaningfully with purpose, with a sense of values, I'm really grateful to both of you. I hope we have more such conversations lined up with you. We create more such webinars. We'll have a lot more people. People have been writing to us. Thank you, the Outstanding Speakers Bureau, for getting all three of us. And I wish very amazing recovery to all the business owners, business leaders, employees. And I hope very soon we have a webinar on how we successfully came out of it.
Yes.
And on that spirit, thank you all of you once again for joining in, for tuning in, and we look forward to see you again very soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having us. It's been a pleasure. It's been lovely. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.